The trial began in early 2005 with jury selection. No sooner had the jurors been selected that Newsweek was trying to undermine them, claiming that a middle-class jury would be unable to fairly judge a family of lower-class accusers. In an article titled "Playing the Class Card," the magazine said, "The Jackson trial may hinge on something other than race, and we don't mean the evidence." As the trial kicked into gear, it became quickly apparent that the case was full of holes. The prosecution's only evidence was a stack of heterosexual porn magazines and a couple of legal art books. Thomas Mesereau wrote in a court motion, "The effort to try Mr. Jackson for having one of the largest private libraries in the world is alarming. Not since the dark day of almost 3/4 of a century ago has anyone witnessed a prosecution which claimed that the possession of books by a well-known artist were evidence of a crime against the state." Gavin Arvizo's brother Starr took the stand early in the trial and claimed to have witnessed 2 specific acts of molestation, but his testimony was completely inconsistent. Regarding one alleged act, he claimed in court that Jackson had been fondling Gavin, but in a previous description of the same incident he told a wildly different story, claiming Jackson had been rubbing his penis against Gavin's buttocks. He also told 2 different stories about the other alleged act on 2 consecutive days in court. During cross-examination, Jackson's lawyer Thomas Mesereau showed the boy a copy of Barely Legal and repeatedly asked if it was the specific edition Jackson had showed him and his brother. The boy insisted that it was, only for Mesereau to reveal that it was published in August 2003, 5 months after the Arvizo family had left Neverland. But this information went almost entirely unreported, the media focusing on the boy's allegations rather than the cross-examination which undermined them. Allegations make good sound bites. Complex cross-examination does not. When Gavin Arvizo took the stand, he claimed that Jackson instigated the first act of molestation by telling him that all boys had to masturbate or else they would turn into rapists. But Mesereau showed under cross-examination that the boy had previously admitted his grandmother made that comment, not Jackson, meaning that the whole molestation story was predicated on a lie. Under cross-examination, the boy severely undermined the prosecution's conspiracy charge by claiming he'd never felt afraid at Neverland and he'd never want to leave. His accounts of the alleged molestation also differed from his brother's. Unfortunately for Jackson, Gavin Arvizo's cross-examination was all but ignored as newspapers giggled and gossiped about what became known as Pajama Day. On the first day of the boy's direct examination, Jackson slipped in his shower, bruising his lung, and was rushed to hospital. When Judge Rodney Melville ordered a breach warrant for Jackson's arrest unless he arrived within an hour, the singer sped to the courthouse in the pajama trousers he'd been wearing when he was rushed to hospital. The photographs of Jackson in his pajamas went all over the world, often with no mention of Jackson's injury or the reason he was wearing them. Many journalists accused Jackson of faking the entire event in order to gain sympathy, although sympathetic is the last word you'd use to describe the media's reaction. The incident didn't stop the media from sending Gavin Arvizo's lurid allegations around the world the following day. Some outlets even ran the boy's testimony as fact, rather than conjecture. "He said if boys don't do it, they might turn into rapists. Cancer boy Gavin tells court of Jacko's sex," wrote the Mirror. But the boy's cross-examination was another story. It went almost entirely unreported. Instead of stories about Gavin Arvizo's lies and the 2 brothers' contradictory allegations, newspapers were filled with snarky opinion pieces about Jackson's pajamas, even though Pajama Day had been days previously. Thousands of words were dedicated to whether or not Jackson wore a wig, and the Sun even ran an article attacking Jackson for the accessories he pinned to his waistcoats every day. It seemed like the press would write anything to avoid discussing the boy's cross-examination, which severely undermined the prosecution's case. This habit of reporting lurid allegations but ignoring the cross-examination which discredited them became a distinct trend throughout Jackson's trial. In an April 2005 interview with Matt Drudge, Fox columnist Roger Friedman explained, "What's not reported is the cross-examination of these witnesses is usually fatal to them." He added that whenever anybody said anything salacious or dramatic about Jackson, the media went running outside to report on it and missed the subsequent cross-examination. Drudge agreed, adding, "You're not hearing how witness after witness is disintegrating on the stand. There is not one witness, at least lately, that hasn't admitted to perjuring themselves in previous proceedings, either in this case or in some other case." This alarming trend of ignoring cross-examination was perhaps most apparent in the media's coverage of Kiki Fournier's testimony. Under direct examination by the prosecution, Fournier, a Neverland housekeeper, testified that when at Neverland, children often became unruly, and she had sometimes seen children so hyperactive that they could, feasibly, have been intoxicated. The media scurried outside to report this apparent bombshell and missed one of the most significant pieces of testimony in the entire trial. Under cross-examination by Thomas Mesereau, Fournier said that during the period which the molestation supposedly happened, the two boys' guest rooms had been constantly messy, leading her to believe that they'd been sleeping in their own quarters all along, not Michael Jackson's bedroom. In a devastating blow to the prosecution's increasingly hilarious conspiracy charge, Fournier laughed at the idea that anybody could be held prisoner at Neverland Ranch, telling the jurors that there was no high fence around the property and the family could have walked out at any time with ease. When Gavin and Starr's mother, Janet Arvizo, took the stand, Tom Sneddon was seen with his head in his hands. She claimed that a videotape of herself and her children praising Jackson had been scripted word for word by a German man who barely spoke English. In outtakes, she was seen singing Jackson's praises and looking embarrassed and asking if she was being recorded. She said that had been scripted too. She claimed she'd been held hostage at Neverland, even though logbooks and receipts showed she'd left the ranch and returned on 3 occasions during the period of, quote, captivity. Watching their case crumble before their eyes, the prosecution applied to the judge for permission to admit evidence of prior bad acts. Permission was granted. Prosecutors told the jury they would hear evidence of 5 former victims. But those 5 former cases turned out to be even more laughable than the Arvizo's claims.
And to make it even worse, it appeared, the judge did something I've never seen happen in a case like this. With respect to 3 of those alleged 5 victims, he allowed witnesses to come in and say they saw them molested without the prosecution having to bring the actual alleged victims in. Okay? So they did that. They put on 3 guards who had worked at Neverland to say they saw these 3 people molested. And the 3 people they say they saw molested, they were my first 3 witnesses. They came in and said they were never touched.
The more money on the table, the more salacious the allegations became. Roger Friedman complained in an interview with Matt Drudge that the media was ignoring the cross-examination of the prior bad acts witnesses, resulting in skewed reporting. He said, "When Thursday started, that first hour was this guy who had worked at the ranch as a security guard. He told the most outrageous story. It was so graphic, and of course everybody went running outside to report on it. But there were 10 minutes right before the first break on Thursday when Tom Mesereau got up and cross-examined this guy and obliterated him." The 5th alleged victim was Jordan Chandler, who fled the country rather than testify against his former friend.
Now, my understanding is the prosecutors tried to get him to show up, and he wouldn't. If he had, I had witnesses who were going to come in and say he told them it never happened, and that he would never talk to his parents again for what they made him say, and it turned out he had gone into court and gotten legal emancipation from his parents.
June Chandler, Geordie's mother, testified that she hadn't spoken to her son in 11 years. Questioned about the 1993 case, she seemed to suffer from a severe case of selective memory. At one point she claimed she couldn't remember being sued by Michael Jackson, and at another said she'd never even heard of her own attorney. She also never witnessed any molestation.
So when that happens, I think we were able to effectively take all of us and say, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you can't believe these prosecutors. You can't believe their case. You know, they'll say anything to try and win.
When the prosecution rested, the media seemed to lose interest in the trial. Thomas Mesereau commented retrospectively that the media had been almost salivating about having Jackson hauled off to jail. When the jury delivered 14 not guilty verdicts, the media was humiliated, Mesereau said in a subsequent interview.
"We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of a lewd act upon a minor child."
Media analyst Tim Rutten later commented, "So what happened when Jackson was acquitted on all counts? Red faces? Second thoughts? A little soul-searching, perhaps? Maybe one expression of regret for the rush to judgment?" The media did a number on its audience, and it did a number on Jackson. After battling his way through an exhausting and horrifying trial, riddled with heinous accusations and character assassinations, Michael Jackson should have felt vindicated when the jury delivered 14 unanimous not guilty verdicts. But the media's irresponsible coverage of the trial made it impossible for Jackson to ever feel truly vindicated. The legal system may have declared him innocent, but the public, on the whole, still thought otherwise. Allegations which were disproven in court went unchallenged in the press. Shaky testimony was presented as fact. The defence's case was all but ignored. When asked about those who doubted the verdicts, the jury replied, "They didn't see what we saw." They're right. We didn't, but we should have done. And those who refuse to tell us remain in their jobs unchecked, unpunished, and free to do exactly the same to anybody they desire. Now that's what I call injustice.